And welcome to another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Rick Jordan. Where do I start with his bio? He's a CEO of a company he built himself from scratch. He's a pastor, an author, a documentary maker, a father. Rick, I can't wait to have this conversation and a very warm welcome to the show.
What's shaking, Richard? It's good to be here, man. That's probably the best intro I've ever had, brother, for real.
Really? Oh, good.
Yeah,
Well, we're off to a
it's
great start.
it's concise and to the point. I love it.
Right. Great. So, yeah, with all my guests, I love to start at the start, give people a sense of who you are, where you came from. So, yeah, take us all the way back to little Rick growing up, and the backstory for who you are today.
Oh, that's great, man. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, about 30 minutes outside the city. And, take it back to little Rick. If you want to go that far, I was actually called Ricky when I was young. And
Okay.
that's because my father's name was also Rick, which was
Okay.
Richard. Our full names are Richard. And
Right.
any time around, I think that was just the distinction is he was called Rick, so I was called Ricky. But then when we would see his family, like around holidays, it was funny because his family would call me Rick and they would call him Ricky because his sister and his mom they would call him Ricky when he was 5 years old too. So it kind of got reversed. But I always liked the name Rick, and I transitioned that over to I think it was like sixth or seventh grade. So you're talking like 10, 11 years old. I'm like, Ricky's done. That's a past life. We're gonna grow up at this point, and I'm just gonna be Rick from here on out. And I just determined like that's gonna be the case. Ironically, my son, who's also Richard, we've called him Richard ever since he was born, and he goes by Richard still to this day,
Okay.
man. It's awesome. But throughout that, I learned great things when I was young, especially from playing sports, baseball. I like to say that my leadership style is a lot like a baseball coach because I played baseball for 9 years. I was really good too. And it's more like I'm the coach because it's like high five and here's our MVP. You're doing awesome there. You're crushing it. And it's also you struck out 3 times. Sit your ass on the bench for the next 2 innings because you need to think about this and we'll work on your swing, okay? But you got to get back up there in 2 innings because you got to support the team. So it's very similar to that as far as leadership style goes. It's a lot of mentorship, a lot of helping you grow, and you also have to want it too. Because otherwise, if you don't want it, at the same time, so we're like, I'm going to put somebody else in right now, just for
Mm,
the next little bit while we help hone your skills, and then we can bring you back up to bat in a couple innings.
right. And yeah, your dad was a big figure in your life, right? He
Very
he
much
was
so.
he was a musician, but
Yeah.
there were also some hard times there, as I understand it.
Yeah, he was a musician. His degree was in music. He actually taught music in a junior high school for many, many years. This was before I was born, from what I'm told. And then something happened. This was like I think he and my mom got married. I think it was 1973. So throughout the 70s, he was teaching music, but then something happened in the States where they defunded public school systems from some of these other programs like art, music, things that weren't STEM as we would call it today, right?
Mm,
A lot of mathematics, science, history, all of those quote unquote important subjects that everybody feels, at least back then, that, music was something that was a luxury or just something kind of over the top, not needed. Same with art. And so at that time, he became a salesman and he sold term life insurance, really to people that were in impoverished facilities and communities within the city of Chicago. There was a lot of like, hey, you just need $10,000 to cover your funeral and burial expense. Let's get that set up for you. I'll come every month and I'll collect the cash from you to make the premium payment. Even if it was $15, something like that. That's how he made a living for many years, man, with sales. He did some other things in sales, but most of it was insurance sales. Really low policy stuff just to try to get things by. And you're right, the rough times is because he didn't make a lot of money at it either. Yeah, he
right.
probably could have sold a lot of things, but this is one that he chose. And he always said that he had the best part-time job in the world because he wanted to always be there when his kids left for school in the morning, and then he always wanted to be back home before his kids returned from school in the afternoon. So that was his purpose in life, man. Was more so I need to be a present father every possible moment I can. So really cool guy.
And so you had a lot of love for your father, and you spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, even the baseball games I was talking to you about, right? There's sometimes he'd be an assistant coach, but he attended. And, from what I remember, I say every one of them. I'm sure there was probably just a few that he had missed, but I remember him being there all the time. You know, I can't remember a time to when he wasn't. But if we're just human and realistic, there was probably a couple that he couldn't make because I mean he was on a church board and he had other obligations too. But it's like I
Right.
always remembered him being present in anything that I needed him for. And I try to do the same with my kids to this day, man. That's I've got a great example to follow.
Well, that's awesome. What a legacy to leave with you. That that experience of feeling loved and yeah, seen by your dad.
For sure. He
Yeah.
didn't make a lot of money, brother. He didn't make a lot of money, but that was by choice from what I can see. You know,
And
because
how much did
I
you
don't know what
feel that then, the stress of that, or was that not something you were really conscious of as a kid?
you know, as I take a look back, because the only thing that I say, because my parents had a great romance, the only thing I can say that they ever fought over was money. You know,
Mm,
and I'm sure as any kid experiencing that, you know, if you take a look at what that might mean from even like a Freudian perspective, it's like if I would see that, you would see that, well, the lack of money also means the lack of love, you know, because if you take and kind of correlate that, I've done work on that specific thing and I don't really feel that way, but of course it comes up, you know, and it's also, it's like, for me, it's like the lack of money means really the lack of resources. And I've helped shift
mm.
that in my life because money to me is a resource to help provide an environment and support for a lot of other people, man, to be able to do a lot of things. It's one of the reasons I took my company public is to be able to generate wealth for a lot of people within the company and shareholders that I don't even know. You know, it's just a really cool emphasis on how that can be used as a resource to propel you to where you want to be. You know, even speaking, everything else, we have benefactors at events that I host. It's like money's really freaking cool, man. And I hope that everybody can, and I say that in a way, it's like not to be this guy who seeks out money, but it's a way to where it can be really freaking cool as a resource to help you fulfill your purpose in life, which has nothing to do with money.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And people, many people have, yeah, perhaps dysfunctional relationships to money, or
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
something about money. So yeah, just unpack that a little bit. So what was your relationship to money growing up, and did you have to shift it to to develop the wealth that you've obviously generated?
Yeah, it's my relationship growing up to it was kind of twofold. It was the side to where there was not a lot of it flowing, you know, for many,
Mm,
many, many years. I mean, there's times at the church that we were going to, they would bring over Thanksgiving meals. You know, there were times to where my parents would not have enough to even go out and get Christmas gifts, you know, and which wasn't
mm,
a super important thing because I grew up through that, you know, and I'm not like a lot of kids that you might see today. It's like if they don't get gifts or get the gift that they want, for that matter, they get gifts and they don't get the gift that they want, they throw tantrums. You know,
yeah.
that was never the case for me because I mean, even when the church brought gifts over for Christmas to help provide that typical American Christmas for us, you know, it's like
Right.
that I still remember those times to remember the support of other people in like a community, you know, which is really awesome, you know, and I love community support of a lot of things, man. And something like that, it's like that's something that sticks with me till now to be it's like, well, we didn't have money, but if you take a look at the church, it's like a lot of other people donate to the church and then the church has the money, which is a resource, dude. It's a
Mm,
resource to be able to do these things for other people and help them out. You know, because the
yeah.
church is not, I mean, there's a lot of churches around that make a lot of money. They get a lot of donations, right? But
Yeah.
the more money that a church has, even so, the more money that a church has as a resource, they can impact even more people. They can grow the
Yeah.
church to be super huge. And there's a lot of people who are like, you know, churches should never be big. I'm like, you kidding? The bigger they are, the more people they can impact. Come on now. You know, like, oh,
Yeah.
it's coming up in the church world. It's like, oh, it's not a numbers thing. We're not concerned about the numbers. Like, yeah, should be concerned about the numbers. Because if you're
Right.
not concerned about the numbers, how can you have the impact that you say that you want when you're just like, oh, whatever happens, happens. Let's put some intention into the type of value and support for the community that we're looking to provide to.
Right. Right. And so you grew up with a sounds like a pretty healthy relationship to money then. You saw it as a resource, you saw it as important.
Yeah, and I saw my parents in a lack of that in a lot of areas too. And even down, there's another lesson that I remember from them because it was and maybe this is the start of like implanting the entrepreneurial seed in my brain for real. Because
Right.
as I take a look back at it now, I've never compared it to that before, but I see it now where there was a scenario to where it was a theme park, right? There's Six Flags that are all over Six Flags theme parks that are all over the United States. And
Right.
there still is one on the north side of Chicago here. It's something I wanted to do with a buddy of mine was get this season pass because we could go there, we could do this sports fest that they have. We could go there whenever we wanted to throughout the summer months, even 5 times a week if we wanted to. And so I asked the question to my dad. I was like, Dad, why don't I get an allowance? A lot of my friends get an allowance. They get X amount of dollars per week that's given to them to do whatever they want to do with it. And he's like, well, I'm going to give you a choice then. Would you rather have an allowance and save up for what you want to save up for? Or would you rather the money just be available and your mom and I try to do everything we possibly can in the moment to get you what you express your needs are to us, like this season pass to the theme park? As I look
Yeah.
back at it now, it's like, of course I chose, I'm like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense because otherwise I'm going to have to save up for like 12 weeks. I'm going to miss it this year. Of course, I like this other arrangement better because then it's like a cohesive team. You guys are supporting my needs. As long as I tell you what I want, you can say yes, you can say no. But still in that moment, I started looking at that and looking back at it now, man, it's like whenever I think about money these days, it's like, well, there's always more to be made. Even if there's a
Right.
lack somewhere around that, it's like, because I think, well, I fully believe in savings plans and all this other stuff and retirement planning, all that other whatever, but in order to have the freedom and have the flow of money in your life, I believe it has to be more like how my dad expressed this to me just about this theme park annual pass. Would you rather have it be there when you need it to be there? Or would you rather
Mm.
have this small trickle in over time? And I start
Right.
to think about the entrepreneur. It's like, I'm going to go produce what I need to in the moment to make this happen
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that.
versus,
It's more of
I mean, I gotta
we
say,
might say abundance mindset. It's right. It's there. It's always
yeah,
available if I take the right action, as
right
opposed to
on.
like this fixed entity that just sort of slots into my account every month. Yeah.
You got it. And who knows, maybe at those times too, maybe my dad went out, I don't know this, but as a salesperson, maybe he went out and sold some more policies that month to help cover that expense
Mm.
for me. So he had similar mindset around the same thing.
Right. Right. And then there's a tragic turn, right, with your father.
There was, yeah, when I was 16, he was 46. He passed away rather suddenly from leukemia. And I say suddenly because it went from everything looks fantastic to he's dead in about 2 weeks' time.
Oh wow.
And it had been about a 2-year scenario. He was diagnosed with this when I was 14, and then he was on injections to help keep it at bay. And this isn't anything that he contracted from anywhere. It's a genetic thing. His was, I think it was CML, if I remember right, that specific form of leukemia. He had what's called the Philadelphia chromosome. And the only way that happens is at birth. Like 2 of the pigtails on the chromosomes actually like flip and connect in an opposite way. And it stays dormant until kind of like middle age, which is what happened to him. Yeah, so there was nothing that anyone could have done to cause it or really prevent it over that course of time. It just was there like a ticking time bomb, so to speak,
Mm.
inside of him. And he was having injections for 2 years to help keep it at bay. But then it came to the point, I remember this, it's like, well, you should have a bone marrow transplant because that's really, that at that time, that was the only cure, the only real like nail in the coffin, so to speak, in a good way. To be
Mm.
like, we can fix this. This is how we fix this. So he went through the bone marrow transplant. Everything actually, from what looked like, went just fine. So he elected to do this just to continue, just to get rid of the leukemia forever.
Mm.
And that is what took a tragic turn. He had 2 things. He caught a staph infection in the hospital. And when you have a bone marrow transplant, they have to completely irradiate and eradicate your existing bone marrow. That's what
Wow.
produces your white blood cells, man. That's what produces
Mm.
your whole entire immune system. So for a period, you have no immune system. And they put the new bone marrow in, then it has to pick back up. And the second part they said was graft versus host disease. So the new bone marrow actually didn't take, even though it was a great match, like a 5 out of 6
Ah.
match. So it was really like the procedure itself, not necessarily the disease, but the procedure designed to cure the disease is what ended up being the end for him. And that's why it took he successful, at least it looked like in the time, successful transplant. And then it was one night he spiked a huge fever. Yeah, and then there was just a 2-week stretch and that was it.
Oh man. God, and so how was that for you as a 16-year-old?
Yeah, it's I remember speaking at his memorial service, and when I was 16, if you want, I wouldn't say that was my first speaking event as a speaker. I'm
Mm.
throwing a little humor in there because I had spoken in church settings prior to that. I remember when I was sixth grade, I think it was. So you're talking 10 years old. I asked to be able to teach a class. To be like, I've got something awesome to say here. I've been looking at this stuff. I want to say something. I want to teach people this stuff. And they're like, well, okay. So, and I remember finding like the incredible details. I'll go back to my dad and his death in a sec, but it was about Noah's Ark, and
Right.
how everyone talks about the animals and how the earth flooded and how the rainbow at the end, it was the promise from God that he's never going to do that again, right? That's what everybody focuses on. But the thing that really got me honed in was the massive size of this thing, like how many cubits. Cubit was cubits long, cubits wide, and then it was like cubits high. I'm like, this thing was like the Titanic, and that's what I ended up being able to see. So when I saw that, it was like, the story to me wasn't so much about this promise and everything. The story to me was this massive undertaking and incredible provision that was given to all these people, and then also the work that they had to do to put into it to save their own skin. Because
Mm.
imagine if you believe in Noah and all of that and God, imagine if God came to Noah and said, hey, build this ship. And he's like, no, I don't think so. That sounds like a lot of work. It's like that's the part of the story that I focused on, was that, not so much it's like the flood and the promise afterwards and all. It's like, this was like a collaboration, dude. It's like somebody had a vision and then you still had to put the work into it to get this thing
Mm.
done, and you saw this massive result afterwards, and that's what saved everybody and saved all the animals. So
Right.
it's a cool look at this thing. But
Yeah.
so
And what
then
comes to me as you share that is the faith that Noah had, right,
for
in this
sure,
message he
yeah,
had received, right? That yeah, I'm gonna go on faith here. I'm gonna go
yeah.
on the message I'm getting.
Right on. And I don't know what you believe, man, but I mean, even if you don't believe in God or anything else, the
No, I
story
do. I
is
do
just
believe in God.
beautiful.
I'm not a practicing Christian. I was baptized, but yeah, I'm not a church goer. But yeah.
Yeah. So you know the story at least, right?
Mm.
And then you take a look at that, and it's not even like to me, it's like not even a biblical principle as far as that goes, because the churches will sensationalize the aspect of that story on on the flood and the promise and
Yeah.
all that stuff. It's like, well, let's look at the stuff that Noah had to do. And it's like that's sort of like a blueprint for life, dude, for serious. It's just that's how we're meant to live, no matter what it is. If you're working a W-2 job, it's like you got to put in your effort in order to obtain that income, because otherwise you get fired or you're mediocre, right? If you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're an entrepreneur or anybody who's interested in kind of self-growth or self-love, there's a lot of work that you have to do. I mean, everything's out there. It's like I posted today. I mean, it's like, stop bitching about the life that you have, or if you don't want to put in the work, or you can learn to love the life that you have. If that second one's not an option, then do the freaking work. I mean,
Yeah.
that's Noah. That's literally Noah, dude. you know? It's like, imagine if he's like, oh, there's a flood coming. Crap, we're all going to die. What am I supposed to do? And it's like, here's this vision given to him. It's like, okay, well, I could do this, but that just looks like a lot of work. I'm not so sure about that. Isn't there somebody else who could do this? I mean, I can only almost imagine it going that way, but he didn't, thank God. Uh, so when it came to the point to where my dad's memorial, it's like I'd already done those things. So it's, just said, I've got something interesting to say. And I felt the same way on that day with my
Mm.
dad's memorial. It's like, I've got something interesting to say in proper perspective. And I remember, I mean, of course, I mean, tears coming down. I was emotional. And I would tell stories. It's like I always remember him being there and providing this stable family life. Even when he wasn't there, it still seemed stable with him gone,
Mm.
because he had already laid that foundation,
Right.
and it was always that stability that just kind of existed because of him. And looking down, it's like I knew that what he had put into me. You talk about legacy, and I just interviewed somebody on my show, and they were talking about legacy, and they defined it as something that is really meant to affect other people that have surrounded you in your entire life. Whereas a lot of people look at legacy as like it's a you thing, and that's not it, right? That's
Yeah.
if you make legacy a you thing, that's totally becomes an ego thing. So when I looked at my dad, it's like I looked at him, I remember saying, "I'm not going to let you down." And when
Mm.
I said that at his memorial service, it was like, the things that you've created around you, that literally had nothing to do with you, to give everything that you had to your kids, to people that are surrounding you. That is what your legacy is. And I was recognizing that he wasn't his own legacy, that I was quite literally his legacy.
Yeah.
And that's the part to where it's like, you've given me so many resources and tools and teachings and a great mindset. I'm not going to let you down and have that go to waste, because I realize now, just like Noah, that it's up to me to put in the work.
Right. If it's got to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and 60, and you've got a young brother and a young sister, right?
I do. Yeah. They're 5 and 6 years younger than me. So they were 11 and 10 years old at the time. My brother was 11. My sister was 10. Yeah. They're all still alive, healthy, doing their own things. My brother just turned 40, which is incredible when I think about that, because I still see him as little brother, which is funky. Same with my sister. She'll be 40 next year, which is also intriguing to me, because they're only about 13 months apart. But,
Okay.
they're good people, man. And when my dad passed, I was one that helped raise them, because I was one that would get them up in the mornings. My mom would work full time, to make ends meet. I think she was only making about $7 an hour as like a data processor or a data entry person at that time. And I would get them up for school in the morning, make sure they were dressed, fed. Then I would drive them to school. Then I would drive over to my public high school for my classes. And then I think she picked them up, because I don't ever remember picking them up. Now that I think about it, I'm kind of curious how they got home, because I don't know. I know they got home, but I was, I think she was off in time, because she would start work really early, and I think she went to pick them up after school, during that period. I just knew I drove them. But then I would go to work. I'd be working at McDonald's for that first year, and then after that, I was working
After
at
you'd
Radio
finished
Shack.
school, you'd work in the evenings.
Yeah. I got a work release permit for that, so I could get out of school early. And
Oh,
go
wow.
to
You
work.
left school early to go put the hours in.
Yeah,
Now.
I had enough credit hours, and my grades were average, dude. It's nothing like. I mean, you take a look around and you see, like this. I mean, people would consider me successful, right? And if I'm true, it's like compared to most standards, I am. And I look back at school, and it's like I just got kind of average grades. And even like sophomore, second year of high school, I failed English. I had to retake that English class during my junior year of high school. And it's really just because I didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to do the homework that was required of me. And I kind of picked up the information, and I still feel this way to this day. I've got my own ideas about the public school system. But still, my thought process was, well, if I already know this information, why do I need to do the homework? Because if I looked at math, which I've always been great at math, it's like I picked up everything, and I knew that I could ace the test. Just there without having to do the homework. It'd be no big deal. But I would still only get a C in math, right? A middle average grade, just because I didn't do the homework.
Okay.
So I'd go from learning the information in class, absorbing it, understanding it, at least in math and chemistry and anything science related, right? And then I'd be able to go straight to the test and get an A on the test. One of the highest grades, like 97, 98%, because I consumed all the information. But it was the homework in between that I'm like, screw this. I know it. Why do I need to practice this when I know this?
Right.
I look back, there's some value in repetition, right? To be able to hone in your skills. I mean, you take a look at the baseball player, is going back to that, right? They might be the top player in the league, dude. Or if you look at Michael Jordan, it's like they were still there practicing every single day. Because I don't think you understand, and I didn't at the time, how that repetition can actually, even if it's just 1% better, but that still makes you 1% better than anybody else who's trying to hone in the same skill. So regardless, it still makes you better, not even so much to other people, but even better than who you were, which you are really where your competition should be focused, right? Are you a better you today than what you were yesterday and the day before that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great message. And so you're in high school, you're flipping burgers in the evening, and then what's next, right?
What's next is Radio Shack, and I don't know if you remember Radio Shack. It's an electronics store.
Well, we sort of got to know about it in the UK, but not because it ever came to the UK. Just it was kind of become part of the culture.
For sure. It was like 6,000 stores in the US, though. I mean, they were massive at this point in time. And that was like 1998, 97 is when I started working. But I was only 17 years old, man, when I started working for them. And I could sell, like, people say like ice to an Eskimo. I could sell ice to an Eskimo. And the other
Right.
reason I could do that is because I would actually ask literally every single prospect. So if there was someone coming through the door and they were buying batteries, I found out that I made a crap ton of money off of selling cell phones. And at that time they were like
Mm.
the larger brick phones, some
Yeah.
flip
Right.
phones,
Yeah.
the original Nokias.
Yeah.
There were these tiny little things with the numbers on the front. But a lot of wireless carriers, so they had the promotion for a penny. You'd sign up for a 3-year contract, you get the
Mm.
phone for a penny. So anytime somebody would buy batteries, AA batteries, or if they were walking in and buying, I don't know what else was sold at Radio Shack, even a TV, a small TV, I would ask them the same question, like, would you like a cell phone for a penny to go with that today?
Right.
And they'd be like, "What? What are you talking about?" But dude, that's straight up a McDonald's question. Would you like to
Yeah.
supersize that? Would you like fries with that? Would you like a Coke with that? It's an upsell. So and that stuff's all a numbers game. So when I say that I was really good at sales and could sell ice to an Eskimo, it's only because I asked every single Eskimo the same
Right.
question. That's why I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I would ask for the order every single time. If you talk about like the Wolf of Wall Street, I ask everybody for the order. That's what so many salespeople miss out on, is like they start to predetermine in their mind, oh, this person will buy, that person won't buy. And
Yeah.
so I asked every single person, man, in this high volume store. I remember Christmas as a 17-year-old. I made $30,000 in commission because I
Wow.
sold over 300 phones during the month of December, and I would get paid a $100 spiff on every single phone that I sold. I was
Wow.
the best salesperson in the country out of all these 6,000 stores for Radio Shack, but it's literally because I,
Wow.
I asked every single Eskimo. I hit the same question to everybody, no matter what they were buying. Yeah, and
And I tell
that's
you,
go
go
ahead.
on.
Yeah,
No, I just tell you what strikes me as you say that, and it's a theme that runs through not just the sales story, but it seems to me you had ability to just to let go of your ego, right?
It-
Because it's the ego that says, "Oh, I might try this prospect, but that prospect looks a bit."
totally.
If
Yeah,
you could,
yeah,
it's your ego it's feeding you that, right? But if you could just kind of let go of that and just think, "What's the impact I want to have?" Then you do have that freedom just to ask and ask and ask and ask.
yeah. Right on, man. That's a good perspective. I appreciate that. Somebody was telling me something last week about an ego too, about how they thought I had a well balanced ego. And it's because I think everybody needs a little bit of toxic ego just to continue to drive them forward. But at the same, if there's areas that you can kill it, like you're saying right there, because then you make it about the other person, and that's a good
Yeah.
point. When you make it about the other person, it can't be about you.
Yeah, and it comes through in your story about legacy, and yeah, it
Yeah,
just seems to be a big part of your perspective. That's what I'm
I love
picking
that.
up. Yeah,
But I mean, imagine that as a 17-year-old, right, pulling in
yeah,
30K in a single month, and that was eye opening to me. I'm gonna tell you a story if we have time here
yeah,
about
yeah.
one of
Of
those cell
course.
phone things, right? And it goes along with the ego thing you were talking about. There was a because still to this day, at least in the U.S., when you sign up for a postpaid wireless plan, meaning like you have the service and they bill you after, right? Not
Mm.
prepaid, which I know when I was in Radio Shack. And I remember because I would see people come up and some of them would get declined, or they would require a deposit, to, okay, you can sign up for the cell phone plan, you get the phone for a penny, but you have to put down $300 as a deposit, and after your contract's up, you get that $300 back. So it's really just kind of sitting there in whole. But then, of course, the cell phone company would use that money if you ever missed a payment or whatever.
Mm.
And going back to people that I would see, I remember one couple that walked in because this was kind of uh, it was a bigger town, but then outside of this town was farmland, and
Right.
they came in, didn't smell the greatest, just had dirt all over them. And, I mean, it just, wearing like a flannel with holes in it. And I'm looking at these guys, and it's that moment. It's like, I don't remember what they were buying, but it was something small. I can still visualize them walking up to the counter, right, to pay, to check out. And of course, I have my question ready to go. Would you like a cell phone for a penny? To go with that. Thinking, I'm still going to ask this. It was never a question of whether
Mm.
I'm going to ask this, but I'd already floated through to the end of this in my brain that they're not going to get approved. They're going to have a huge deposit. I mean, look at these people, right? And it was rare in those days to have somebody come up with a zero deposit. And I'm sure you can see where this is going, right? So they filled out
Mm.
the application, everything. sometimes you had to wait like 15 minutes to get the response from the credit department, from the wireless company. This came back instantly, man, with a $0 deposit. I was like, holy shit. You know? And then as they left, I'm just like watching them leave, and I'm like, I am never going to prejudge anybody else in my life again. Because it's
Right.
like the lesson that I learned right there, it's like it doesn't matter. And people say don't judge a book by its cover. Now, still, I value things about appearance, right? Because working for me, it's like we had a supervisor, that I was like, dude, if you want to be promoted, because he wasn't a super, I'm like, you got to clean yourself up, because you have
Mm.
to look like a leader, at least like you care about your appearance, right? But who knows about these people, because they might have literally just come off the field, for the work from the day, right? Had to go pick up some
Mm.
batteries or whatever it was, for that night. Probably why he smelled too, and I remember it being just a husband and a wife. But that lesson is something that still I carry with me to this day. And it's like,
Right.
because people in sales, or at least sales management, will say, you know, you're shopping with your own wallet, when you're trying to sell, because you're thinking like, oh, those people don't have enough money, or they'll never pay this price point. This is too high ticket for them, and even with that, they might want to ask for the order, but they're going to think that the price is too high. So they already like lowball themselves in whatever kind of offer it is,
Mm.
rather than starting at the standard price points. And that's shopping with their own wallet, thinking it's like, oh, well, if I would never pay for something like this, or I couldn't afford this, or I couldn't pass the credit check, how can I sell this to somebody else?
Right.
Learned a big lesson that day, man.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great lesson, and something I hear over and again from very successful entrepreneurs is that they've had a history of sales. It's such an
Yeah.
important skill, isn't it?
Yeah. All I had to do was take 10 minutes with them, and I made $100. Yes. It's a pretty good return on investment right there on the time.
Right. And at this point, you're have you gone to college at this point, or is this still high school while you're making all this money?
This is still high school. And then when I graduated high school that year, and after that, I was in the management training program for Radio Shack, because what do organizations do? They take their top salespeople and think that they can be good managers. Sometimes that works out, sometimes that doesn't work out, because they just look at somebody who can make a lot of money, like, oh, this person's great, let's put them in there. Uh, Thankfully, I do feel that I'm a good leader. I'm not as good of a manager as I am a leader, and I hold a distinction
Mm.
between those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm great at vision casting, setting the strategy, all of that. But then when it comes to, like the weeds, if you've ever read like Rocket Fuel, right, which is based on the entrepreneurial operating system, they talk about the visionary and the integrator, right? I
Right.
am totally a visionary, not an integrator. I can do the integrator job, but the part about the book that I love that made me laugh, like, but if a visionary goes over to the integration side for too long, they literally start to get brain damage, or they feel like they're going to. And
Right.
that's me. It's like I can do it. I can run the operations. I can do all that stuff. I can even be good at it, but it starts to eat away at the very core of my soul, because it's not what I'm meant to be. And it's not even so. It's like I don't mind putting in the work. Obviously, from our conversation, right? I don't
Yeah.
mind building the ark like Noah did. But it's like when I do that, when I'm there too long, it just stifles the strategy and the creativity in me to be able to see things, like
Mm.
6 months, 2 years into the future with the industry and the company. Uh, they threw me in the management training program. And dude, I still credit it to this day, because now having a public company that's primarily focused on growth by acquisition, reading financial statements all day long. I was taught when I was 17 years old at Radio Shack how to read financial statements, P&Ls,
Right.
balance sheets. And the reason being is because when you're a manager, which they did when I was 18 years old, they gave me a store doing $1 million in revenue. They gave you full control over the staff, the amount you paid your staff, the ordering, the inventory levels, even down to like the cleaning service that you would hire to clean the store. You had control over 90% of that P&L, because
Mm.
your bonus as a manager was only on the net income, the net profit of that store. That was your only bonus metric. So as long as you kept it profitable, and the more profitability you had meant the more money that you would make. Yeah, so it was
Right.
incredible. So even when you're 18, it's like they taught you how to be a business owner, and then handed you a business. Said, here you go, after they taught you all these
And
things.
gave you the profits of it, right? Or a portion of
Exactly.
the profits of it.
Yep, right on.
Yeah.
I think it was a really good, I don't remember specifically why they went bankrupt, but for the time being, that was a fantastic model, man. To
Mm.
be able to allow the management, the leadership, to have participation in the profits of the organization. which is also one
Right.
reason I like having a public company, because it's like if everybody in the company is a shareholder, it's a similar thing. It's like everybody's working towards increasing the market cap of the company. And the way
Yeah.
we do that is actually providing a good service and controlling the stuff that we can control, running the business in a healthy way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and from there, and so did you skip college, or did
Yeah, I didn't
you
go.
go to college?
I can't say I didn't go. I went for 2 weeks, brother. Just 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. It was it was a it was a local college, a junior college, if you want to call it that, like the first 2 years, leading up to the last 2 years. And I went, it was 2 weeks, and I'm like, this is definitely not for me. I don't want to be sitting in here because I mean, this is coming off. I was a store manager at that
I
point.
was going to say, what's going to
Yeah.
compete with you running $1 million business? Yeah.
Exactly. And even coming off of like just 6 months prior making that $30,000 commission check, I'm like,
Mm.
this is a waste of my time, for what I want to do and where I want to go, and at that time, that was 1998, 1999. The idea of technology being taught in schools, which is what I liked anyways, was still rather new.
Mm.
They weren't really teaching networking, or teaching, servers and all these things, which is what I got into next after Radio Shack was, building enterprise systems with Merrill Lynch, like servers, workstations, networking, and then cybersecurity, even with them way back then, for all the branch offices. So it was a lot of building on this stuff. And still to this day, it's like the best education in the tech space, I feel, are these boot camps, which I did go
Right.
to. I went to a 3-month boot camp, but the 3-month boot camp was on Linux and networking, learning the binary math that actually had an application to the stuff I was actually working at right then and there,
Right.
like in the
Yeah.
real space. And I learned everything that somebody in college would learn in 2 years. I learned it in a matter of 3 months.
Right.
Going every single night, 5 nights a week for 4 hours each night. It was so compressed, and it's like you could
Mm.
apply it right away. And I still believe that's a great choice for a lot of entrepreneurs or anybody who wants education. Like, I don't know if that 4 years, but I should say that maybe doctors have this right. Out of any profession that requires college or university, I think that doctors have this right because they learn the education foundation first, right? The head knowledge.
Mm.
But then they're put into a residency while they're still learning. They're able
Yeah.
to actually apply what they've learned so far and what they're currently learning in real time in order to continue to expand their knowledge and have it set in. I'm sure there's other professions, I can't think of them right now, that actually do that, but there's not a lot, dude. I mean, imagine like
That's
an
true.
accountant, right? I mean, accounting has to go to university. I get that, right? That's one of the few professions. But it sucks that you have to learn all this stuff and not have to apply it for 4 years.
Right. Well, even accountants, yeah, a lot of accountants do learn on the job, right? They take
Yeah,
a
right
day a
on.
week, and yeah. I mean, I did electronic engineering, so I was learning all that stuff, Boolean algebra, and the stuff you
Oh
just
yeah,
described.
man. Yep.
But you're right. I mean, I kind of leisurely, I took it leisurely over 3 years, and there were lots of drinking and partying, and I
Yep.
didn't apply it at all. So I absolutely I could have condensed that for sure. I wouldn't have had as much fun, perhaps, but I could have certainly
Yeah.
learned it
I
a
feel
lot
you.
more
Yep.
quickly.
I would go out with friends, but I mean, it was pretty cool because going out with friends, it was always like, and I love this too at that point because, well, they were in college or had some lower paying jobs. Dude, I love being able to like create environments for people. I mean, I
Mm.
remember like a Fourth of July party I threw a few years ago, and it's like I invited 150 people over, even people that were like acquaintances that I knew that weren't really friends. But it's like, let's just have a big ass party. I got a food
Yeah.
truck and everything, just because I loved walking out there and seeing so much happiness among so many people. And
Right.
it's like fulfilling to me, to be like, I created this. I created
Yeah.
this for everybody else. And it circles back to like money's a resource, right? And it's like when they
Yeah.
say that money doesn't create happiness, it's like I'm looking around, I'm like, I don't know. It's like, because I just used it, but maybe they're talking about yourself, right? Money doesn't create happiness for you. Sure, because it's like I've had the Aston Martin, and I sold it. It's like having that didn't provide happiness for me. It provided some fun when I would drive it, but it didn't fulfill me and give me happiness in my
Mm.
life, spending the money on me, right? But when I use it as a resource for other people, I look around, I'm like, dang, they're happy. I use this as a resource to create an environment of happiness for a lot of other people. And because of that, now I am.
Right.
It's like when I spend on other people or whether I provide for other people, that's what like brings it right back to me to fulfill me and give me the happiness I'm looking for.
Right. So it's your ability to take that money and and use it for service of others
Yeah,
that
it's so
gives you the
cool, man.
happiness.
So freaking awesome. Even
Right.
like buying, I've told this story before, but it's like I would challenge anybody who's watching or listening, do these things randomly. It's like one thing that I do in the States. It's like, obviously, we value our military. I personally very much value our military. It's like, literally the reason why we're safe. I
Mm,
see that. And with things going around the world, it's like, thank you for choosing to contribute to our community, our society, our country in that way. It's if I see a veteran at a restaurant, I try as best as I can to look for this man, because a lot of them, at least the ones from, like Vietnam or the Korean War, not so many World War II vets around anymore, because that was from a long, long time ago.
mm,
But when I see them and they're wearing their hats, or I can identify them as a veteran, I'll always ask the server, it's like, can you just put their check over here? Just give me their check too. Because I want
right.
to they've done so much. And it's like, this is like quite literally the least that I can do.
Yeah.
To say thank you, in an
Yeah.
action
That's
form,
special.
anyways, for sure. Or
Mm,
same with like going to a grocery store, and this is still one of my favorite stories, man. She might have been 80 years old, and she's buying gelato, right? There's a gelato stand, and it might have been like $4, something like that, and she's fumbling around trying to find a card or cash, and I just look at her and I'm like, Miss, which by the way is a good tip for anybody. Never call anybody ma'am or anything like that, because miss is probably the safest word you can use to address a woman that doesn't have to do with age.
right.
Learned that a long time ago, right? But I said, Miss, I would love to get this for you, please. Allow me today. I want you to have just an awesome treat. Okay. So when I did that, dude, she started crying, and
Mm,
I'm like, are you okay? What else can I do for you? He goes, no, what you don't know is that today is the 3rd-year anniversary of my husband passing. And he and I
mm.
would always just go get ice cream or gelato together. So every year on the anniversary of his passing, I go and I just get ice cream or I get gelato on my own just to remember him. It
Oh,
was like a standing date that they had, and I was like, oh my
mm,
goodness, So in that moment, it's like she's like, you just made me so happy today.
wow.
And
Yeah.
I mean, even now I get emotional when I think about it, dude, because it's just,
Yeah.
isn't that what we're meant to be on this earth?
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're meant to do?
Yeah. That's such a kind act.
Uh, Whoever's watching and listening, for real, like, it's so not about you.
Mm,
People are going to think that it is. When they see what you have and see the things that you do, they're going to think that it's about you. And that's okay, because they've got to deal with their own demons in that
mm,
space. And this
mm.
happens all the time, dude. I mean, if you want to call them haters, you can call them haters, because they'll misinterpret the good things that you're doing for other people, and they turn it around and make it about themselves and try to find ways to pick it apart.
Yeah.
But dude, the moment, as you said it earlier, it's like the moment you begin to take offense or begin to try to, combat that or attack back or whatever it is, that makes it about you and that thing.
Yeah.
So the more that you can make it about everybody else and just ignore that bullshit from whoever that are going to misinterpret that, you're going to have more and more opportunities like that woman at the ice cream counter.
Yeah. It's just, how can I have this woman be appreciated, have this veteran feel appreciated, and
You
have
got
it
it.
over there? Yeah. Yeah. That's
You got it,
a
man.
great message.
That's being human,
Uh,
right?
that is being human. It reminds me once of, and this wasn't actually, it wasn't giving a sort of material gift, but I remember I had a suit made once, and there was this Italian tailor, brilliant Italian tailor in London, and he'd obviously been working in it, and it's this really like hot, stuffy office in this little room
Yeah.
in the center of London. And I just said, how is it being a tailor? I mean, this must be hard work in this office. And I just listened to the guy and was there for the guy, and he just started weeping and telling me how hard he found his life and so on. And I didn't do anything else but listen to the guy for like 5 or 10 minutes, and the tears were streaming down his face. And I really got a sense that I gifted him something. I gifted him this opportunity just to release a bit, and
Mm.
I let him have the sadness. And yeah, I really relate to that. Yeah, if you can, and I have an ego like everyone else, right? It takes some will to let it go, but
It
when I
does.
do, and I can put myself over there, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's awesome, brother. I'm glad we're kindred
Yeah.
spirits that way. I know we share a name, but it seems like we share things a lot deeper too.
Yeah, right. Okay, you're if we haven't got like, oh god, I feel like we could go on forever, but you move on from Radio Shack, and then you start your own business, right? And this is what you've ultimately built up over the years, and
Yeah,
ultimately took public, right?
for sure. Yeah, I started to reach 14 years, and it wasn't until probably like 2017, 2018, so about 7, 8 years in, when I started looking around. It's like, how much more of an impact can I make than this? Because I've got some employees, not many, like 5, right? And we're just about to break $1 million in revenue. So it was a lifestyle business for a long time. And that's when I launched my personal brand. It was 2018, and doing some really cool stuff. Like the first event that I did was an entrepreneurial event. I spoke at the boardroom at NASDAQ in New York City. And
Your first event.
I know, right?
Nice.
It was a, you paid to do that,
Okay.
but it was a room of entrepreneurs, and so, but at the same time, it's like, even though you did that, it gives you the experience, it gives you exposure. It's if you want to call it marketing or branding, whatever you want to call it, it's still worth it to do something like that. People think that they're going to get, if they start speaking, that they're going to end up getting, 6 figures in a matter of like a year or something like that, to
Right.
get the speaking fee. It's like, no, a lot of the stuff when you start out, it's like you have to pay to be there. It's one of the best ways to get on stages in your early days is actually paying to be at an event or sponsoring events. And then you can get the exposure. But I had somebody photograph that, and there was a photo of me in that boardroom floating around the internet somewhere, still out there. And it was me in that NASDAQ boardroom, and this consulting firm approached me, reached out to me and said, hey, we saw this image of you. Have you ever thought about going public? I'm like, nope, never have. I'm currently trying to scale right now, and do these things. And like, what do you mean? If you had the money, if you went public, what would you do with the money? And I'm like, that's easy. I'd buy other businesses like mine. I'd roll them up and make a nationwide brand. I've already had this thought for like the last 2 years. There's a big hole in the market right now. This is what I need to execute on. There's nobody else that's ever done this in my space before. And I went on and on. They're like, wow. Like, we've talked to 2 other owners so far as we're trying to find people, because this consultancy firm was, it was a business funding company, and they were starting to dabble into Regulation A's in the state with the SECs, which is it's a way to sell shares of your company to the public. So it's kind of like a mini IPO.
Okay.
You make the market yourself. It's not listed, but still it's public shares, just like a public company would be. And they're like, we would love it for you to be our first one, because you're the first person who's answered this way. And also, I mean, we just can't get over this photo of you at the NASDAQ market site. And it's like, so we talk about image earlier, right? And it's like, there's methods and reasons behind all of these things that you do. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because the impact that I'm able to have through that, and then also the company, literally is what brought the company to the point of being public. Is all these things. I mean, it's just like back in 6th grade, right? Hey, I got something to say. Can you let me teach? And that's still the same to this day, man. I love doing that.
Put your hand up. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So but I think that's important, right? Because there's a lot of people that have something to say and things that could probably change lives, but they're just too afraid in the moment to speak up, or even just say, I've got something to say. Would this value your audience?
Yeah.
Asking that is like opening the space to allow that invitation for you to come in. I've learned that lesson over the years too. Is just be like, I got something to say. Would your audience benefit from this? I think it could help.
Yeah. 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 And again, it's again, would your audience benefit from this? Not making it about you, right? Like putting it out there. What's the greater good here? Yeah, no, that's great. And then I know we don't have long left, but you've also written this book, Situational Ethics, about about the lessons you've learned in this space of ethics. So we've only got a few minutes, but what's your main message around ethics in business, ethics in life?
Yeah, ironically, it's a lot of it relates to around money. And money is something that can help people's ethics, or it can hurt it. And I used to have a phrase that I would say, and I forgot the phrase now, but I wrote the book about experiences in my own life that I was directly involved in, or those that I witnessed. So they're all real stories. And I look back now, because some of those stories, and this is why it's actually not available for sale. It was my first book. I actually dictated it to an editor who then put it all together. So it worked, and it was almost kind of like cathartic to me too, because you took a look back at the events of your life and all these things, to where you start to realize that being human, people's ethics kind of sway at times, for survival instincts and for other things. It's like, how do you make the right decisions in these moments? That was the goal of the book, and I'm probably going to do, I was just talking with my team, I'm probably going to do like an updated version of it, because I don't like how some of those stories are portrayed to where it almost looks like victimhood. Because that's I take a look like 6 years ago when I wrote the book, and it's like, some of those things now, it's like, that's not, now that I'm better at communicating exactly what I felt, during those times, is a better way to present this thing. So if I present it as like, there's a couple of choices here, what's the best choice? And rather than being like, oh, this was done to me, that kind of perspective. I mean, the book was kind of like, I'm sure you've seen Breaking Bad, right? Or shows like it. There's like some shows, right, some series out there to where you go through them, and it's like after you watch an episode, you feel like you have to go take a shower because the story was just so dirty. And it's like, that's some of the stories that I had in this book, because someone was like, people would actually do that. I'm like, well, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me, or that's exactly what I saw happen to this other person. And it was usually because money was involved some way or another, and so now, rather than writing a book about that, I'm probably going to write a book. Actually, it's like 13 out of 17 chapters done. It's about money specifically. And that I'm hoping to come out here within probably the next 6 months to a year, after I finish getting the foundation laid for the public company here, because that's taking a lot of my bandwidth right now, man. But it's about having a good relationship with money, that you should want it. It's not a bad thing as long as you're using it for the purposes like we talked about on the show today.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Well, that's a book the world needs, The Ethical Use of Money. There's plenty of unethical uses out there, so that's great. That's going to be a great contribution. Fantastic. Okay, Rick, well, I know you've got another commitment, so with great sorrow, I'm going to have to close the show with you. But yeah, it's been awesome. As you say, that book is not available, but we'll send people to your website. Presumably, that's where you'll announce the new book as it comes up, and we'll put. Well, it's all there, right? The documentary, which we didn't get into. Links to your business around IT services for people.
Well, if you'll have me, I'll happily come back for a second episode. It's a good convo, brother.
Absolutely, let's do it when it's out there. Let's get it out there and promo it. That would be awesome.
Sweet. Richard, thank you, my man. Pleasure.
Thank you, Rick. All right, have a great day.
Thank you too.